year, nearly 700,000 children are victims of abuse and neglect in the U.S., with about 2,000 of these cases resulting in death. Joining us now is an attorney who is fighting to keep children out of abusive homes. Theresa Wozniak Jenkins joins us on the MegaCast. Theresa, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
So you are in the midst of starting a nonprofit law firm that will work to ensure that people who can't afford to litigate parental alienation cases, which are often expensive, are able to be represented by top lawyers. What was your motivation behind working to begin this nonprofit law firm?
So I wanted to be a lawyer since I was really young, and that motivation came from things that happened in my own household that were tragic, but it is the path that my soul chose. I know that now. And as a result, I went to law school, became a lawyer, and what became apparent to me is that we have a very broken family court system. And many, many children's voices are not heard in this process. And many people who cannot afford to have their children seen by professionals or have their cases evaluated by the appropriate people, like clinical forensic psychologists, private investigators, all of these people that come into play that are necessary parts of these litigations. Most people can't even bat an eye at the expense of that. And that's a tragedy, because what happens is children get forgotten, they get pushed aside, and they get treated like they don't matter by the system that purports to be advocating for their best interests. So I decided a long time ago that I was going to do a nonprofit. I was going to form a nonprofit. And I recently had the opportunity to make that happen. And I'm very excited to be spearheading this.
So beginning the Justice Lawyer League, as you are calling it, it's aiming at helping kids that, and as you said, in a normal situation, given the way that our system currently works, would not be properly represented in cases where they're being abused or where they're being neglected, and often that would lead them into either continuing to be exposed to that abuse or to be continuously neglected. But that also brings the question of how would these kids then be able to approach or know to approach or be able to then get the services of such a nonprofit law group in that situation? Because I would think for them to be able to come forward or someone to recognize that, that's also a really tough thing to navigate when it comes to abuse of a child or neglect. So how is that? How do you plan on bridging that gap?
You raise an excellent point. Oftentimes, the way that cases come to people like me is through one of their parents. My law firm also handles cases of CPS and defense against CPS, and we also prosecute CPS for failing to do their due diligence and take care of children. So in part, we have to address first, reaching out to people who are currently in crisis, who have children who aren't being heard. Next, we have to do a public campaign. We have to make people know about this, and we have to let children know too. The good thing about just talking with people like you is it gets the word out. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm not only trying to start this nonprofit, I'm trying to bring awareness to this huge gaping hole in our system that basically treats children like they're second class and that their voices don't matter. And even when there is forensic evidence that proves that they're being abused and the court doesn't pay attention, there are going to be people that stand up and fight for them and make sure that this stops with everything that they have.
We're joined by Theresa Wozniak Jenkins. She's an attorney and is fighting to get children out of abusive homes by beginning the Justice Lawyer League. And so you mentioned that often in these cases they're brought to attention by a parent of the child, despite the child being in an abusive or in a situation of neglect. Does that imply then, and correct me if I'm wrong, that in these cases it's a concerned parent that finally does raise concerns about the other parent in a two-parent situation that may be causing harm to their child and want to get their child and maybe even themselves the help that they need?
Absolutely. That's one aspect of it. I will tell you, I've had grandparents come to me when their son or daughter have passed and they notice abuse or neglect in the situation. I've had parents come to me in CPS cases when CPS is the person who, or excuse me, is the entity that is causing a child harm. One case in particular, I had a child who got hooked on drugs and pregnant while in a foster care situation being withheld from her mother. So these are the types of situations that I'm talking about. It's not just child custody and parental alienation and abuse and neglect cases. It's any case where children are being harmed and the justice system is ignoring them. I am going to handle all aspects of those cases, and the Justice Lawyer League is going to band together and make sure that we have an impact across the nation in helping these kids get out of these situations or the remedy that they need in the situation that they're in.
So often these situations do turn into a custody battle, whether they're putting the child into the foster care system while they're deliberating the legitimacy of the ability of the parent or of the parents to raise the child, or if they're trying, or if there's a battle between one parent or another to claim full custody due to abuse or neglect as a result of the actions of another parent. But these often come into become really complicated situations and really expensive situations too, particularly on the legal side, just to prove that a parent should have legitimate custody of their child, especially if they are, for lack of better terms, a good parent. Why is that the case? What causes that in our current system? What flaw in our current system or flaws causes this process to be, frankly, convoluted and creating a disadvantage for good parents and for keeping children with their parents and out of further situations where they could be neglected or abused or both?
In my experience in this state, because I've practiced law in other states as well, we have a huge problem in our judiciary. While we have legislation that says that we're supposed to have a dedicated family court, many counties don't have the resources to have a dedicated family court bench. We also have a system where judges are elected politicians. And instead of hiring the best and the brightest to be on the family court bench, we unfortunately have people that are elected who've never handled a family court case, who never know about the complexities of child abuse or parental alienation. And so highly manipulative parents or grandparents or entities that have a vested interest in keeping a child out of a loving, caring parent's home because of the strategy, finances, or abilities of another person, that makes it impossible to get past somebody who doesn't have the expertise, who doesn't have the finances to get somebody with the expertise to actually talk to the children and figure out what's going on. Our system is wrought with injustice by the level of bureaucracy that exists. Do you know how much money it costs for people just to get to an evidentiary hearing? That's just to hear the witnesses, just to hear the people talk about what's really going on. There are so many hearings and there's so many steps in that process where it's just the lawyers talking. It's not actually looking at the evidence. And that is a huge flaw in our system. We need to get evidence in front of these judges. We need to get those things taken care of where they can actually see and digest and get the continuing legal education courses that they need in order to do that.
And so, with that being the case, how does a group like yours, like the Justice Lawyer League, that's providing the support that's often so expensive and so out of reach for so many children and so many parents and children together that are dealing with these cases of abuse and or neglect, how does that help to, and maybe not fully resolve the issue, but to mitigate the issue despite the inherent flaws that are in Michigan's systems?
Getting people the resources in these high conflict cases where there is abuse going on, because things like parental alienation are abuse of children. It is a mental and emotional type of abuse that is long-term impacts and huge mental health consequences for children. And so there are factors that highly trained professionals and lawyers who handle these types of cases can instantaneously figure out that this is one of those high conflict cases. We need to designate these high conflict cases as such. We need to have a lot of oversight. We need to have trained guardian ad litems and lawyer guardian ad litems who are interested in listening to their wards and not the parents who are trying to manipulate them and get them on their sides. We need to have a way by which we figure out the cases where one parent is trying to pit the other against the system as a whole or the child and cut that parent out versus people who just don't know how to navigate the process of dividing custody, dividing their assets and their lives in an amicable way that doesn't impact the children in a negative way. Those people exist. This is a highly complex level of litigation in any aspect when you're dealing with child custody where people can't get along. Sometimes it's lack of education, sometimes it's mental health issues, sometimes it's outright abuse. And we need to be able to differentiate the two. And we need judges and legal professionals who can do it like this, who do not demand tens of thousands of dollars in resources from parties up front.
We're joined by Theresa Wozniak Jenkins. She is the founder of the Justice Lawyer League, joining us on the MegaCast. And so, Theresa, what impact does the holiday season typically have on situations of abuse and neglect? Do we typically see an increase in these cases or an increase in severity in existing cases during this season?
Absolutely. It's somewhat known in the family court system that you see a big divide. You see some people trying to reconcile or get better at co-parenting or say, family really matters and we're going to try to do better for our kids. Even if we're not going to stay together, even if we're not going to get along as adults, we're going to try harder. And we see some distance from the system. Other times we see children who are trapped long-term in situations that are abusive because the system wants children to be forced into family situations over the holidays. Or we have parents who are trapped in those situations. Resources are limited. You're focusing your money on things that are important for family and loved ones over the holidays. So you can't divert your resources to litigating and protecting your children when they're already as limited as they are to begin with. Our economy and everything is struggling right now. People are struggling right now. And unfortunately, we have a system where people take that out on the people that they're supposed to love the most. And that level of stress is evident in our system today.
So if someone in a family where one of the spouses is abusive to the children, or to both a child and another member of the family, or in a situation where a child is being abused or neglected in either they themselves or someone else in their life, a grandparent, a neighbor, a friend, a teacher, whatever the case may be, recognizes that, what are the first steps that they should take to be able to provide the best care to that child and help them get out of that situation, or even the child and a member of their family that may be in that terrible situation?
Absolutely. So most communities, most counties have resources for domestic violence victims and victims of ongoing domestic violence. So if you are a family member or a loved one of somebody who you know is being abused, if you know that that person is not in immediate threat of harm, you need to call those local resources. So like in Livingston County, for example, you have La Casa, and they have mental health professionals, housing, resources to help people get out of those situations. If there is an immediate threat of irreparable injury and you know your loved one is in harm's way, call law enforcement. Law enforcement are highly trained in detecting these types of cases and getting the evidence that you would need to get out or get that person out and put them under arrest in order to facilitate the process of you leaving and getting safe, or getting your loved one out of that situation and getting the child safe. Also, contacting CPS. While I unfortunately have seen many times where CPS has turned a blind eye to actual abuse, there are still many good people in that organization, and it is worth trying. It is worth reporting. It is worth reporting multiple times if you know abuse is going on to children.
And so then, Theresa, once it's been reported, once that process has started, how should they go about getting in contact with you or someone else in the Justice Lawyer League, especially if they need this representation and they're like most people, they're not able to immediately afford to make all those ridiculous payments that they have to make to a team of lawyers or to a team of different systems just to move their case along at a respectable pace?
Absolutely. Most law firms that do any sort of divorce or custody litigation have an intake process. A lot of lawyers do offer free consultations. And so take those opportunities to get those free consultations. If not, then you can call the Michigan Bar Association. They have referral services to pro bono or low bono, meaning reduced rate fees for people who can help. The Lawyer Justice League is still pending its 501c3 status. So I want to get going as soon as that status is complete. But right now, we are one step behind being able to run. Hopefully, on the new year, we will be ready to fully take on cases and represent people within the capacity of the league. But we will start out by helping other lawyers who need resources. So, for example, cases where people have already spent $10,000, they don't have the money to hire a forensic clinician to do the custody eval, to find out if parental alienation is going on. They can contact the Justice Lawyer League. We can vet if that's an appropriate case for that. And then the league can help finance that forensic professional, that forensic psychologist coming in and doing the evaluation that's so necessary to get that case moving forward and getting those children out of that situation.
Theresa, if other attorneys in this area of practicing law want to help out, want to help your organization and help these children, help these families through these horrible situations, how can they best get in contact with you?
My office phone number is that's my old number. My office phone number is 248-792-3060. I am presently with the Kerstauskas Law Group, but I am joining forces with Lisa Kerstatawa. She is the lead litigator and owner of that firm, and we eventually will become Kerstauskas Wozniak Jenkins. So that is the best way to reach us right now. You can also reach me at Theresa, Theresa, at K as in kite, D as in dog, lawgroup.com.
That is Theresa at kdlawgroup.com. And Theresa with the TH, Theresa at kdlawgroup.com. Theresa, thank you very much for joining us.
It was absolutely my pleasure. Thank you for having me.